Way back in 2001, a court ordered New York State to make the Adirondacks more accessible for people with mobility issues. One solution rolled out this summer, a motorized wheelchair to ride the 5 miles to beautiful Great Camp Santanoni in Newcomb. So does it work? We ride along with a disability advocate to find out. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Kenny Drugs, now offering a new mobile app to help patients better manage prescriptions for themselves and their family. More at kennydrugs.com. And Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central, and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, September 13th. First up, the Adirondack Park Agency is proposing 3 new sections to the region's policy plan. At its meeting yesterday, it laid out those 3 amendments, which address climate change, accessibility, and carrying capacity studies. Emily Russell reports.
When the Adirondack Park Agency was formed in the early 1970s, it published a policy plan for the park. That document, known as the State Land Master Plan, is now updated every 5 years. Megan Phillips is the Deputy Director of Planning at the APA. She explained the master plan amendment process at yesterday's board meeting.
As we take in new information, scientific knowledge grows, and federal and state policy evolves, we should update the master plan to reflect the challenges, pressures, and opportunities that impact state lands in the park today.
Phillips presented 3 amendments to the park's master plan. First, a new section on climate change. It would require future management plans in the park to, quote, plan for and assess climate change vulnerabilities. The second proposed amendment is about accessibility. Here's Phillips again.
The new language requires DEC to inventory existing structures and improvements that meet accessibility standards within the unit management plan, as well as identify management actions to make recreational programs and features more accessible for individuals with disabilities.
The third big change proposed for the park's master plan is about carrying capacity. Environmentalists have been calling for a carrying capacity study for years, especially for Adirondack lakes and ponds. Carrying capacity basically looks at how much human impact an environment can acceptably withstand. But at yesterday's meeting, Phillips shifted the focus away from carrying capacity studies to a broader management approach, one known as visitor use management.
Carrying capacity was once the gold standard for management, and after several decades and evolving science, visitor use management framework is the new modern recreation management planning model that brings forward the best parts of previous models, including carrying capacity, limits of acceptable change, and the visitor experience and resource protection, or VERP.
Essentially, what Phillips is suggesting is that a visitor use management plan is broader and more comprehensive than a carrying capacity study. And if this amendment is adopted, a visitor use management plan would fulfill the state's responsibility to address carrying capacity. There was some concern about this shift. APA board member Zoe Smith said even just the language centered around visitor use, it seems to weaken the emphasis on the natural environment.
It feels like the language could be strengthened a bit about protecting the resources. Stakeholder involvement perhaps could be strengthened in there, and just emphasizing the importance of that, looking at desired conditions.
All the proposed amendments to the park's master plan will be presented at 3 public hearings in the future. There will also be a 2-month public comment period. Dates for those have yet to be set. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
Earlier this summer, the DEC debuted a motorized wheelchair program at Great Camp Santanoni in Newcomb. The devices are the DEC's latest attempt to comply with a decades-old lawsuit under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Disability advocates say the state's pilot program is a step in the right direction. But as David Escobar reports, some say there are still concerns that need to be addressed.
Scott Remington has dreamt of experiencing the beauty of Great Camp Santanoni for a long time.
I've been trying to get in here for years.
Remington is paraplegic, so he uses a wheelchair to get around. That's made it impossible for him to travel the 5 miles of trail it takes to get to the historic Great Camp. That's until today.
And you just push this button to go ahead? Is that what you do?
Say yes.
Okay. Whoop.
Remington is hoisting himself from his wheelchair into the DEC's motorized quadricycle. It's a 4-wheeled device with treaded wheels like a mountain bike and a bucket seat for the rider. But he says the transfer was difficult.
It was not a very easy thing when you can't use your legs, you know. I mean, a younger person in a little better shape probably could transfer over, but it's not for everybody.
The 4-wheeled electric wheelchair is one of 2 devices the DEC acquired for its mobility pilot program. It launched earlier this summer to give people with mobility issues a way to travel along the trail. The other device is a motorized scooter, which I ride alongside Remington. We start our journey through the trail's dirt and gravel roads, which takes about an hour with stops to enjoy the scenery.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. It's, you know, it's gorgeous here.
Remington came to enjoy the beauty of Santanoni, but he's also a member of the DEC and Adirondack Park Agency's Accessibility Advisory Committee. It's the committee that created the Great Camp's mobility pilot program. So Remington's here to test the new devices.
A quadriplegic or somebody like that uses a power wheelchair would never be able to use either of these devices that are here today.
Remington's wheelchair is fitted with levers that allow him to control his speed and direction on the winding trail. He says those manual controls work for him, but they're not for everyone.
If we want to make it accessible for everybody, we should find a real solution.
Remington's concerns are part of a bigger issue the DEC faces at Santanoni. Because of a court settlement in 2001, the state is now required to make the park accessible from May through October under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But that court order runs into another problem, the Adirondacks Forever Wild provisions.
In order to be ADA compliant, there would have to be violations of the park plan, which forbid motorized vehicles, for example, from accessing these locations like Camp Santanoni.
That's Nick Friedman. He's the executive director of Accessible Adirondack Tourism and has been part of the state's planning conversations about Santanoni. State plans designate the road into Santanoni as administrative. That means only state employees can use motorized vehicles on it. Remington says he's asked the DEC to operate an ADA-compliant shuttle, like a golf cart with a wheelchair ramp. But Santanoni's unit management plan prohibits those vehicles, even though Remington says it would make the trail fully accessible.
It's really discrimination, I hate to say it, in my eye.
The DEC tried to create a shuttle a few years ago. They plan to partner with Larry Newcomb, who operates a horse-drawn carriage service on the Santanoni Trail. But Newcomb says he was never consulted on the design for the ADA accessible wagon, which was too dangerous for his horses to pull. Accessible Adirondack's Nick Friedman says the DEC's new motorized wheelchair and scooter are a way to bypass the trail's vehicle ban. He says the state is still experimenting to see if these devices are viable solutions.
That's why this assessment is so important. If this demand comes in and people say, you know, we really want to do this on our own. We don't want to have to get out of our own wheelchairs. We don't want to have to switch mobility devices. Then there may be motivation to work to change the park plan itself.
Remington plans to submit his feedback to the DEC about his experience with the mobility pilot program. He says it's a first step towards a solution at Santanoni, but he wants officials to address a larger problem he's seen across the park.
The APA and the DEC have had a mindset of just when they buy a piece of property off a group or whatever, they close the roads. They don't look at ways to keep some of it open for somebody that has a disability or, you know, has mobility issues that can't walk that far.
The DEC says it's actively expanding its accessible outdoor recreation opportunities around the state, including a new interactive online map that lists over 260 parks with accessible features. Remington says he wants the DEC to keep looking for a solution so that one day anyone can experience the beauty of Great Camp Santanoni, regardless of their mobility. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio in Newcomb.
David Escobar comes to us from Report for America. He reports on diversity issues in the Adirondacks through a partnership between North Country Public Radio and Adirondack Explorer. Music today by Caitlin Scholl of Lake Placid and B. Children of Canton. Have a great weekend. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.